Hello, everyone, and welcome to our compatriots in Armenia and the diaspora. We're happy to have you all joining us today for this live discussion on Q1 highlights and program updates. My name is Hasmik Bilibosyan, and I'm in Armenia with the IGORS program, working with the Office of the High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs, and specifically within the PR and Media Department. I'll be your moderator for this live, and without further ado, I'll pass it over to High Commissioner Zareh Sinanyan, who will begin the presentation and live discussion.
Good morning, Patriots. It's a little past 9 p.m. here in Yerevan, and I know it's in the morning for you in the United States. I wanted to take this opportunity and give an update on the activities of the Office of the High Commissioner of Diaspora Affairs for the last quarter, which is the first quarter of 2021. As you may know, in this post-war period, we are functioning in quite difficult circumstances. Considered, however, the work of the diaspora and Armenian relations and the work of coordinating that work and bringing more integration between Armenian diaspora cannot stop and must not stop no matter what the circumstances. And with that, I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us. And we'll start with a slideshow, which will help me present this report. So with the second slide, we'll start with the trip that I and the Chief of Staff for the Office of the High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs took to Artsakh in early January, and the point of the trip was to meet with the government of Artsakh, talk about the ongoing pending problems, of which there are numerous, and talk about the diaspora's role in easing some of these difficulties and bringing solutions to some of these problems. Obviously, the number one problem right now in Artsakh is the fate of the displaced individuals, of which we have approximately 9,000 families altogether, 30,000 people. The trip to Artsakh revealed that a large number of our compatriots has returned to Artsakh. The government of Artsakh estimates the number of residents to be somewhere between 105 and 110,000 people. The problem is that we have many displaced individuals from Hadrut, from Shushi, and from the liberated territories, which are now occupied by Azerbaijan. And these individuals are clearly staying in temporary lodgings, which are substandard housing and are only temporary and cannot sustain families living in those conditions for a long time. So it is tantamount for Armenia and Artsakh to provide these displaced individuals with housing in a very short time period to make sure that they stay in Artsakh, continue living in Artsakh, and aren't forced to leave Artsakh. In Artsakh, we met with the government, with the president, with all the ministers, and following up on the visit to Artsakh, we had a coordinating meeting between the government of Artsakh and over 30 diaspora and nonprofit organizations at our offices, during which we discussed all the issues, the problems, the strategies, the approaches, the needs, and the resources which will be put in place in order for us to resolve these very difficult problems. One of the issues also facing our nation is the fate of the individuals who've been psychologically and physically impacted by the war. These are folks that are not only wounded physically by the war, but are also suffering various forms of psychological effects of the war. And it is essential that they be provided the proper treatment. Now, in order to make sure that Armenia's resources are supplemented by those of the diaspora, we've reached out to numerous professionals in this field, and as a result, now we have four mental health professionals that are assisting Armenia's own resources to provide the necessary help. And we have held four mental health webinars, which have always had over 50 specialists from Armenia present, and a couple of dozen specialists also from the diaspora. These webinars they started out a little slow in terms of folks voicing their thoughts and being active, but now have turned very lively and seem to be very fruitful. As a result, we have cooperation between diaspora and Armenian healthcare specialists. Most of those specialists from the diaspora are from Russia and the United States. But we also are partners with the Armenian American Sports Medicine Association, who assisted 11 physicians traveling to Armenia to work directly with our wounded soldiers. The post-war health solutions also include the provision of proper prostheses for the amputees, most of whom are soldiers who fought in the war and are lost their limbs. And once again, the goal is to provide soldiers, our wounded soldiers, with the best prostheses available. We have engaged our diaspora professionals in this and have four professionals working with the Armenian healthcare professionals. And these are individuals that have worked in all the hotspots of the world, South Sudan and in various parts of Africa, and have wealth of knowledge in providing prostheses, not only in terms of the actual physical prosthesis itself, but also organizing the work associated with providing prosthesis for those needing it, and the accompanying rehabilitation work that goes along with it. Now, one of the aspects of our work clearly is our visits to diaspora communities. It's face-to-face contact, without which it's difficult to really keep active contact with the diaspora. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, since March of 2020, I and our various employees were stranded in Armenia and could not travel anywhere. The only exception right before the war was a trip to Beirut, Lebanon, following the explosion there. But now we've resumed those visits. The first visit in this conditionally post-COVID period, which is not really post-COVID yet, was to Russia. During that trip, I visited Moscow and various other cities, Saratov, all the way out to Siberia, Yekaterinburg in the Urals, Tyumen in Siberia. Visited our churches, communities, our community centers, schools, held forums during which we communicated very honestly and very directly with the patriots in Russia. These trips will continue, and we are doing our best to get back to a normal work routine. Work with diaspora communities also involves work around repatriation. Repatriation was and remains a primary and important goal for Armenia and for the Armenian government. And not only does this work involve planning stages of repatriation, sort of creating the infrastructure that will make repatriation possible and as painless as possible, but also dealing with those of our compatriots that have already moved to Armenia. So in this process, we held and organized a meeting with our Lebanese Armenian repatriates I'll remind you that in August, September of 2020, we had approximately 2,000 Lebanese Armenians who repatriated to Armenia or moved to Armenia. And because of the war, we weren't able to provide them with as much hands-on assistance as we did before the war, but we're getting back into the routine of keeping in touch with our repatriates and making sure that institutional problems are resolved, rectified, and also individual problems that they have, and they have many, are addressed to the extent that it's possible to address them. So we held a large meeting with the Lebanese Armenian repatriates, during which 100 of them participated and raised all the typical kind of repatriation-related issues that apply not only to Lebanese Armenian repatriates, but to all of them. Anyone who moves to Armenia comes into contact with most of these issues. Some of them being very Lebanese Armenian specific, but most of them being very general. We're planning on having the second such session, because we realize that there's a need for it, and intend to continue as long as these needs are met and addressed, and our repatriates have the repatriation logic also has a professional repatriation component. The idea being that we want to encourage diasporans to move to Armenia and join the government in order to bring their work experience, their work ethic, their work culture, and change things from within, so to say. So I'm happy to report that that process, despite the war, is moving forward. I apologize, I'm getting over a very bad cold and have to cough sometimes. But as part of our IGORS program, which has been in place for the last 6 months, we've been able to bring 52 professionals from various countries of the world to Armenia and provide them with the fellowship opportunity in the government. Now, it was the first year of our program, but so far it's been quite successful. Understandably, there are many issues that need to be worked out, many kinks that need to be worked out, but overall, it's a great program that most people are very happy with. The government seems to be very happy with, and we are initiating the second year of IGORS, and have announced the application process beginning of March. The application process will be open until April 15th. Once again, there will be 50 diasporan professionals with a minimum of master's degree and 3 years of work experience, or bachelor's degree and 5 years of work experience from colleges, and they will be provided a fellowship opportunity with one of the ministries or departments of the Armenian government. Obviously, we prefer that the applicants speak Armenian, but we have at least a couple of current fellows whose Armenian skills are somewhat lacking, but nevertheless, that hasn't stopped them from being very effective at what they do. Excuse me. I want to encourage, especially our compatriots in the United States, to apply to this program. We do have currently fellows from the US and from Canada, but their numbers are much lower than those applying from Russia and Europe. And we want to make sure that this program is well balanced, and we have sort of all diaspora represented in the program. Therefore, once again, I want to encourage everyone to go to our website and apply to IGORS Fellowship second year, which will commence on September 1, 2021. But the application process, the intake, will stop on April 15th this year. So you have a little over 2 weeks to get your applications. There's a wealth of information about the IGORS program on our social media sites, on our Facebook, Instagram. We have many videos, testimonials, and again, I want to encourage everyone to apply. And I do want to remind everyone that in order to apply this year, we have instituted a recommendation letter policy. And I know that that kind of slows things down for people, but prepare your recommendation letters in order to have a valid application. Another one of our current of our historic programs, this one pretty much the only program that we inherited from the Diaspora Ministry, is the Step Towards Home program. It used to be called Alitun. Now currently it's called program. It's a kind of summer camp program for youth between the ages of 13 and 18, during which these youth have the opportunity to travel Armenia to meet with spiritual, governmental, cultural leaders in the country, visit the parliament, churches, government buildings, learn Armenian songs and dances. It's a very fun program, always has been very popular. Last year, unfortunately, we couldn't hold the program because of COVID limitations, but we did hold it online, which was, you know, kind of a interesting format, and nevertheless, 200 young people participating in the program. This year, we actually are planning on having the program live in Armenia, and we'll be holding 4 sessions, each 2 weeks long, and in each of the 4 sessions, 100 young boys and girls will participate. We look forward to seeing all of you in Armenia as part of this program. There's also an application process for this, which is much more lax, and the deadline is also not a hard deadline. I mean, it's not pending anytime soon, but I do encourage anyone who's interested in sending their kids to summer camp to apply now. Another program that we are working on implementing that has to do with repatriation is our Repatriation Integration Center. The idea is, and we've copied this idea from the Israeli model of the Repatriation Integration Centers. The idea is that a family or individual that comes to Armenia clearly has to deal with a lot of paperwork, has to fill out a lot of paperwork and deal with a lot of agencies. And that process can be somewhat unpleasant and long and require a lot of knocking on doors and running from one jurisdiction to the other. We want to alleviate this problem and have folks and families come to one office, our center, deal with one caseworker, whatever your needs may be, whether it's finding a job or getting your paperwork done, your documentation done, or your medical care, or your setting up your kids at kindergarten or daycare and schools. All of that will be processed by one caseworker that you'll deal with, and then that caseworker will deal with the individual agencies. So again, the idea is to make the process of repatriating to Armenia a pleasant one, and we look forward to getting this project off the ground this year. We were supposed to do a lot of the work last year, and once again, the war has delayed this program a little bit, but we hope to finally get the office started and going by the end of the year. Next program that I'd like to talk about is a very important one. It is the mapping of the Armenian diaspora. In essence, it's the creation of the database of who's who in the diaspora in various fields of life, whether professional, cultural, social, medical, because we as a people, and especially Armenia as a country, as a state, lacks natural resources, and in Armenia also lacks human resources, professional resources. And by mapping the diaspora, really knowing who we have outside of Armenia that potentially present an opportunity for Armenia, an opportunity for the government, for the state, for the Armenian people. Identifying these folks, finding a way to communicate with them is a huge asset. And this has not been done so far. In essence, when we talk about our human resources being our greatest wealth, we have no idea where those resources are, what they do, how to get in contact with them. And in essence, that resource goes wasted. So this process, program, the mapping has been commenced. It is ongoing, and by the end of the year, we intend to have a pretty healthy, real-time kind of living database that will be updated continuously to make sure that we know where our resources, how to get in touch with them. We are also providing an employment support program to our compatriots who migrated to Armenia, who repatriated, obviously. Next to children's education, employment is the most key issue that repatriates face. And when you're coming from outside the country, obviously you have to overcome the cultural hurdle of not knowing how things work in Armenia, where to go, and how to find a job. And we continuously help folks finding jobs, and we'll continue to do so. Obviously, as the economy recovers from COVID and grows and grows fast, there'll be much more opportunities for jobs in Armenia in the future. The last thing I want to talk about is that this year genocide commemorative events will be taking place in Armenia. I mentioned that because it's coming up and because last year we were severely limited on commemorating the genocide due to COVID, although the event in Armenia was beautiful and it was broadcasted all the TV channels, news sources. But this year it'll be open attendance at Zareh. I'm sure masks will be required, but gearing up for that, and as the program for genocide commemoration becomes clear and set, we will inform our compatriots through our various social media sites, through our website, and make sure that everyone knows what's happening in Armenia. Just overall, before going to your questions, I want to mention that the COVID limitations in Armenia are, if you compare it to the rest of the world, are quite lax. We have not been in quarantine since beginning of August of last year, of 2020. Vaccination has commenced, although it's going a little slower than I'd like, but a large shipment of AstraZeneca vaccines has arrived in Armenia, and vaccination will be picking up pace, starting with the elderly and those with compromised immune systems. And anyone who wants to travel to Armenia can do so long as they abide by whatever limitations there are, which is getting a test done within 72 hours of traveling to Armenia, or in the alternative, getting a test done when you come here, or if you don't want to get a test done, you will have to quarantine yourself for a 2-week period. So having said that, I want to encourage all of our compatriots in the diaspora to come and visit Armenia. Start coming back because we miss you very much, we need you very much, and Armenia is not the same without you. That's all from me, and I'll speak if we have questions. I'd love to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much, Zareh, for that very informative presentation. We have a few questions. Go ahead and get started. You discussed Q1 programs and highlights. So just wanted to, there's a question here about Q2 and what that will look like for the Office of the High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs. So could you share a little bit more information about that?
Certainly. Before we get to the actual work of quarter two. Our compatriots are probably informed that Armenia will be holding extraordinary elections on June 20th, which is roughly at the end of quarter two. But as far as our jurisdiction is concerned, we are not in any way impeded by the elections. They're not impacting us because work has to continue getting done. And the elections will happen in their due course. In the meantime, we'll continue working. So in the second quarter, we'll continue working our colleagues both in Artsakh and the Armenian government around all the sort of central strategic issues that we have going on in Armenia, which is anything from the defense of the borders to providing, helping provide housing for about 9,000 internally displaced individuals from Adamut and Shusha territories. I do want to mention that the Armenia Fund last week, at the end of last week, announced a $200 million project to build, if I'm not mistaken, 4,000 homes in Artsakh for these internally displaced folks. And numerous Armenian benevolent organizations are also building much smaller projects in Artsakh during our visit. And also the Russian government is building approximately 1,000 dwellings for our compatriots in Artsakh. So we'll continue working on those issues. We'll continue working with our regions, our Armenian Marzes and the governors, matching those organizations in diaspora that want to assist with certain Armenian projects outside of Yerevan, and we want to encourage diaspora being more engaged outside of Yerevan because Yerevan gets a lion's share of diaspora's attention. We'll also continue goals. Obviously, the process of selecting the proper candidates for EGOTs is very intensive. It requires for each of the candidates numerous interviews because not only are we interviewing them and kind of screening them, but the individual ministries are then interviewing them to see if they're a proper match. So if you consider that last year over 800 folks applied, and this year we already have about 200 applicants, the work involved is quite massive. So it takes a lot of time. We'll also continue setting up for the summer camp for Kailatutun program. We will also continue with the creation of the Integration Center, the Repatriation Integration Center. That's a key issue for us. We will also activate the visits to the diaspora communities. The last visit was kind of to Moscow in the eastern part of the country. There is a massive Armenian community in the southern part of Russia. Rostov and Krasnodar area. We'll be visiting that part of the country. Probably before end of June, we'll also visit France, where there's a lot of work to be done. Our French compatriots were and remain extremely active and very engaged with Armenia and Artsakh, and we actually work with them very, very closely. And a trip will probably take place to France. Most likely, I'll probably be on the East Coast of the United States at some point before then, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of work. We are noticing a trickle of diasporans back to Armenia as the weather gets warmer, and I think the flights are getting more available. And more diasporas coming means a lot more contact, a lot more opportunities, a lot more programs coming to Armenia, and that keeps us very busy. I'll mention that our office never sort of acquired its planned number of employees. We tended to be back at about 50, 55 employees at the Office of the High Commissioner, but we're still at mid-20s because again, this disruptions that are very crippling. So we're with relatively few resources. We're doing a lot, and we'll continue doing more.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And speaking of elections, we have a few questions regarding elections. Did a majority of Armenians want snap elections, and how is the diaspora specifically responding to them?
It's hard to say whether the majority of them support it or not. I'm not aware of whether it was conducted to indicate what percentage of Armenia's population was for it or against it. But I think, this was my belief since November 9th, since the ceasefire, that there must be new parliamentary elections because the mandate that was given to this government in 2018, as it was in 2018, does not exist anymore. The reality in which we lived in 2018 doesn't exist anymore. It is the right thing to do for the government to resign, the prime minister to resign, and snap elections to be held immediately so that the Armenian people can express themselves today as to how they feel about things in Armenia, how they feel about the government in Armenia, what mandate they're willing to give to the next government of Armenia. And therefore, I believe and always did that elections had to be held, elections will be held, and the people of Armenia will be given the opportunity for the second time now in the last 30 years to freely express their will, their political will, decide who they want to run the country. And only the people who live in Armenia and who bear the brunt and the effects and the responsibility for the decision as to who should be running Armenia will be voting in these elections, and democracy will prevail. Thank God, since 2018, no more falsifications of elections, vote bribing, use of administrative resources will be allowed. And as I said, for the second time in 30 years, people in Armenia will be able to express that.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And another question, who exactly will be running in the upcoming prime ministerial elections?
I believe that political groups will be running in these elections. Fortunately, the Armenian electoral system has been modeled so badly in the last 30 years that it's difficult for the average person to understand um, how the system works. But since it's a parliamentary system, um, the people will be electing parliament members. They'll be electing parties, and then those parliament members will be forming a government. So it's very difficult to say who will be running in these elections. I assume that obviously the ruling party or the ruling coalition will be running. I assume that some of the opposition groups will be running as well. It's hard to say who it will be because no one has announced the beginning of the campaign. And those numbers and the names may change because a lot more people may use this opportunity to get into politics, and that's normal and that's desirable. So if you ask me that question in a month or a month and a half, I think the picture will be much clearer.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And this is a question regarding the eGORTS program. How are current eGORTS participants responding to the program, and any specific obstacles they've encountered so far?
It's a great question. Anytime you have folks coming from one work environment, one cultural environment, into another cultural environment, and the work environment sort of very clearly reflects that cultural environment, you have a process of adapting to the new So I would say every one of the EGOTS members has gone through some level and degree of cultural shock. And that's, again, very understandable, very normal if folks are going from one very functioning kind of bureaucracy to another entirely different, very functioning bureaucracy. I believe the cultural shock would still be there. But overall, putting that aside, difficulties that folks have encountered has been directly related to the immediate superior under which they have worked. In other words, if that superior is someone who is a good leader, a good professional, usually the board's members have a very easy time settling in and doing the work that they like to do. When you have a low quality leader, then you have run into problems. And again, this is a very human thing. There's nothing extraordinary about that. So most of the problems have been related to sort of person to person level, and we very closely monitor the program and the participants. We are constantly making sure that their skills are being used to the fullest extent possible, because you have to understand that the government of Armenia has made a quite significant investment in this project. It likes this project and likes the results that it has yielded so far, and continues with this project. We're again allocating a large amount of money for the US program to continue year two. So it's actually in our interest to make sure that we get the maximum out of the participants. And that's happening. I very encouraged to see that several of the IGORTS fellows have already had full-time offers from the various government agencies and ministries that they're working at. One of them even got an offer to head a quite large establishment, governmental entity. So the program clearly is well liked. Problems are there. We make sure the problems are worked out. Overall, it's a hit.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And just taking a quick dive back to talking about elections, we have a question from one of our listeners asking if dual citizens would be able to participate in the upcoming elections and how.
Yeah, I, as a dual citizen, will be voting in these elections. The condition to voting is twofold. One is to be a citizen, you can be a dual citizen. But you also have to be in Armenia in order to vote. If you're a dual citizen, but you are on the day of the elections in Los Angeles or New York or Boston or Toronto, you will not be able to vote. And again, the idea behind this is that folks who are deciding Armenia's future with their votes need to know that they are going to themselves feel the impact of those political decisions. So therefore, people or citizens, doesn't matter if they're dual citizens, who are on the day of the elections in Armenia will be able to vote in the elections.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. We have another question regarding the Republic of Armenia and its relations with its neighbors. So the question is the Republic of Armenia currently under threat of attack from its neighbors?
Yeah, that's a very kind of a loaded question, and I can answer it many ways, but I'm going to be sort of give you the blunt and honest answer. And this is how I feel about it. I think the Republic of Armenia is under threat of attack at all times. That's sort of the starting point from which we need to operate. We are a threatened nation. We are a threatened state that has a very aggressive neighbors who are genocidal in their nature and have proven that time and time again. One of the neighbors openly has pretensions to Armenia's territories, the recognized territories of the Republic of Armenia, internationally recognized territories, and openly talks about it. So we have to assume that our homeland is always under threat, and we have to constantly prepare for that threat to actually defeat that threat. Something that was not done, something that has not been done since 1994. We need our governmental institutions to work on a much higher level. We need the professionalism level of the government to be much higher. We need our military entirely reformed and brought into the 21st century. We need our diplomatic corps to be completely revamped and actually establish diplomatic, sort of diplomacy as another means for war, as Bismarck described it, because diplomacy is another form of war. And again, I'm not I'm not sort of um, stressing these ministries, I'm saying the entirety of it. But more importantly, none of this can happen if the mentality of the Armenian people doesn't change. We as a people have been proven time and time again that any time that we rely on anyone, we get punished very badly. We get disappointed, we get surprised, and we're like children. You have unrealistic expectations, and then when you're proven to be unrealistic, we don't understand what happened, and we get punished very harshly for it. So we need to get over this mental dependency and this thing, this thought that somehow we can't take care of our own needs. We can. Taking care of our own needs does mean having good, reliable allies. It does mean having effective diplomacy. It does mean having a strong economy. It does mean providing good governance to our people. So that's what self-reliance means. It doesn't mean that next time we are attacked, we have to be able to confront everyone by ourselves. No, having to confront our enemies by ourselves is a result of not having all those other things. So we have to assume that we are under threat, and we need to prepare. We need to become an army nation where every individual is a soldier ready to do their part to defend their homeland. That's the only way we're going to survive. It's a tough neighborhood. You know what? It's not impossible to do. It's not impossible to get back on our feet, get back what belongs to us, stop anyone who wants to hurt our people, uh, and create a great future for our nation within the territory of the Armenian Republic and the Republic of Armenia.
Thank you. And a follow-up question on that. In the last few days, there have been, some conversations circulating around the possibility of renewing Armenia-Turkey relations. What's the reality around that?
There's a lot of talk back and forth um, about whether that's something that's ongoing, whether that's realistic, whether that's something desirable. My take on this is the following. First of all, we need to understand what our needs are. We need to sort of do an inventory of our resources, an inventory of our needs, do a needs assessment, figure out what's good for us. I'm not sure we have a clear, as a nation, as a people, we have a clear understanding of it. Secondly, obviously, for any nation, it is normal to have some degree of relationship with its neighbors. Obviously, you being enemies with neighbors, especially ones that are more powerful than you, is dangerous. But how much of it is a function of us wanting or not wanting it is a different. These are two different concepts, right? We may want one thing, but that doesn't mean that our neighbors want the same. So once again, you want to have some type of conversation, even with enemies, even with people that wish you ill will. Because, again, we found out during this war that while we weren't talking to Turkey, another country was. And we were sort of a victim of their internal agreements. And we can't allow that to happen. We need to have our own conversations with our friends, with our allies, and our enemies. Having conversations does not mean holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It doesn't mean that we're going to be, talking about brotherly relations in the near future. I'm being cynical, obviously. But having a conversation, I think we must have conversations. But what will come of it, I think, is an open question that will be the result of very, very long and very deep conversations. In the meantime, we have to understand what having normal relations with, for example, Turkey will mean for Armenia. For example, can we withstand Turkey's economic power? We have to remember Turkey is a very, very powerful economy right on our doorstep. We can see the economic expansion that has taken place that Turkey has implemented in Georgia. And Georgia is economically more healthy than Armenia is. It has an outlet to the outside world. We don't. Do we have an assessment of what it will mean for us to open economic relations with Turkey? These are kind of scientific questions that need to be answered by economists and analysts before we take any steps in these directions. So it's a very loaded question. It's very complicated. Should we talk? Yes, absolutely. But realistically, relationships, what that means, and how do you have a relationship with a genocidal state? These are very difficult questions that take a lot of work and a lot of massaging before answers are.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. We have another question from one of our viewers. Is the Office of the High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs working closely with the Ministry of Defense in terms of geostrategy?
The Office of the High Commissioner of Diaspora works with all of our ministries in various ways on various projects. Frankly, the work that we do with our defense ministry, I don't want to elaborate about, but yes, of course, we work with our defense ministry, and of course, diaspora has much to offer and has historically offered, and I'm sure in the future, that involvement with Armenia's security structure, our architecture of national security will be much deeper.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And traveling back to your trip to Russia about a month ago, what would you say was the general consensus during your trip? What kind of relationship building outcomes or what kind of relationship building measures came out of it?
The trip to Russia was overall very successful. We had the opportunity for the first time since the war to look our compatriots in the eye and have very tough conversations. Being away from Armenia, being away from the reality that's here, is very difficult. It's very difficult. I've lived away from Armenia for nearly 32 years, and I know how it feels. And it seems that the further you are from Armenia, the more sensitive you are to these issues, and the more prone you are to misinformation and propaganda, which is being spewed out in the diaspora on unprecedented level. I mean, it's massive. It's massive. So being there actually and talking to people logically and conversing with them was very useful for all of us. First of all, we get a better sense of the pulse of the diaspora, but diaspora also gets information from a primary source. The people in Russia are obviously very shocked and they're traumatized by the war, as is all of the diaspora, but there is this immense desire to get back on the horse and be fruitful and be productive and be helpful, because people are sort of coming out of that stage of mourning and actually want to take steps that are going to put us in a better place today than we were a month ago, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of hunger for information from Armenia, objective information. There's a lot of hunger for attention from Armenia. Again, because of COVID and the war, it seems like the relationship between Armenia and the diaspora seems to be stuck in this donor-recipient format, which I personally extremely despise that spirit of the relationship. I believe in integration. I believe in a back and forth. I believe in a two-sided relationship. And we're trying to create the infrastructure for that through these programs, through engaging the diaspora in various ways, including in the Armenian government. So the visit was very fruitful, showed that we need to have a higher presence in the diaspora because the vacuum that is created by Armenia's absence in the diaspora is filled by other entities who don't necessarily have the right sort of motivations and are looking for other effects other than the success of the Armenian nation, the success of the Armenian state. So we're going to continue the same spirit.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. A question from one of our viewers. There are constitutional disposals which prevent Armenians who hold dual citizenships from running for elections. So the question is, why hasn't it been changed, and why hasn't it been changed for the next elections, for the upcoming elections?
Great question. Great question, and one that I talk about very frequently. The Constitutional Amendment Committee was formed, I want to say, sometime in the middle of last year, and there were going to be two stages of constitutional reforms. One was going to deal with the Constitutional Court directly. I think that issue has been disposed of and is no longer valid, it's no longer relevant. And the second stage of the reform was going to be substantive reform for the Constitution, because it seems that in the Constitution, since independence has been changed at least twice, so it was passed in 91 and then it was certainly changed in 2005. I think it was changed again in 2015. And with every reform, it's been made worse. It seems like every regime that has come to power has tried to design the Constitution to fit their own needs. For example, it became clear in 2018 that the Constitution was changed by Sergic Sargsyan's regime to make sure that he remained in power beyond the two term limits as a president, serve terms as prime minister by changing the country, making it parliamentary. Now, these are very deep sort of philosophical and practical issues that need to be discussed. There has to be a lot of public discussion as well in order to figure out what is this form of government that we believe is best for Armenia. Is it parliament? Is it a presidential republic? Is it a hybrid system? And if so, how should it work? Now, as part of that constitutional reform, we were going to push for the removal of these impediments of citizenship, as well as the 4 or 5 year minimum residency requirement for candidates. Because as the law stands now, and I'm not talking just about elected office, also appointed positions. For example, if person X in New York is the best specialist in a certain field, and he or she is willing to move to Armenia and head a ministry, it is impossible to appoint that person as minister because the Constitution does not allow it. Laws don't allow it. So it's essential that we remove these impediments that are a luxury that big countries can allow themselves, but not one that Armenia and Armenians can have, because again, we lack professional human resources, we lack folks with management skills, and we need them sorely. So any, whether constitutional or legal, should be removed and changed. The elections that are happening in June are extraordinary ones, so they were not meant to be held until, I believe, 2 years from now, if I'm not mistaken. So there just was no time to, no opportunity to change the constitution. When that committee was formed, obviously a few months later, the war started. Then the process of um, holding the extraordinary elections commenced. So therefore, these changes will not take place. If I had my way, I would hurry things along, and I would actually use this opportunity for parliamentary elections to pass an amendment to the Constitution. But I'm not sure that in this political atmosphere, that's an additional kind of uh, additional puzzle that we want to add to already mesmerizing mosaic of Armenian politics that is very volatile right now and actually very dangerous.
Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Sinanyan. And are there steps being taken to eliminate the toxic rhetoric circulating in global Armenian circles today?
You know, are there steps taken? I'm not aware of such steps. Honestly, as things stand in terms of the amount of media that is controlled by those that are spreading the toxic rumors, and these toxic rumors are very dangerous to the Armenian state. The folks who spread this misinformation, and if you've noticed, probably since the ceasefire, there is a steady dose of misinformation that is trickled into the media almost on a daily level. And it's meant to keep Armenia ill, off balance, unable to recover its senses and to get back into action. It's meant to keep Armenia weak and prevent its recovery. And it's being done by the hands of so-called Armenians, people with Armenian names. And again, 99% of it is false information. It's illogical. It's meant to destabilize the situation in Armenia, destabilize the government. Thankfully, the people of Armenia, people in Armenia, will not have it. They wouldn't have it, and they did not provide any support to these forces. Now, these forces have a lot of control in the diaspora because they control a lot of the media in the diaspora. Unfortunately, this is the case, and the government doesn't have nearly the resources to counter it. But the government does have something else. It has the ability and the opportunity to work better. If it works better, its work will speak for itself. It's through work, it's through the results that it can provide and generate through its work that these rumors and this poisonous rhetoric can be countered. That's the only substantive and true way to counter the rhetoric. Otherwise, when the results are below par and unsatisfactory, obviously all you're doing, you're giving credibility to this misinformation that's already spread out.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And a follow-up question. Um, what are some goals that we can set to reach as a global Armenian community this year?
I think the main goal for us as a global Armenian community is to help Armenia find um, stability. Because without stability, there are no goals that we can accomplish, either on a governmental state level, nor is it on a national level. Um, we need to come together as a people and take a deep breath and say, folks, we have challenges that are quite difficult. Sometimes they feel insurmountable, but through joint effort, through a unified vision for our future, we can achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. Unless we have this conversation with ourselves, unless we're each willing to make a sacrifice, to each their own, each on its level, each according to their means, each according to their abilities, but reach a level where Armenia can stabilize and we as a people can move forward in a substantive way to a better future. Again, having lived in the diaspora, I've seen a lot of rhetoric about patriotism and this and that, and that rhetoric is never translated into actual work. It's never translated into substance, and words don't matter unless the goal is to confuse people or work matters. We need to come together and first of all agree on a future. Some people see our future as part of another state. For me, that's unacceptable. And these same people are the people who talk about national identity and talk about preserving our culture. And they also want us to join another state. I mean, these are dangerous people. But I think we need to agree on future for us in our homeland as Armenians, being able to defend ourselves and have normal lives, have normal futures, and preserve our culture on our territory, which is the only place where Armenian culture can be preserved in the long term. Every diaspora is temporary, every diaspora is fleeting, every diaspora has finite life. In some diasporas, that life is much longer than in others. No doubt, no diaspora lasts forever. The only place where Armenian culture can be preserved is in Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And we have a few of our compatriots from the Los Angeles community who are asking whether you plan to visit Los Angeles anytime soon. So could you provide some information on that?
I'd love to visit LA. I'm not planning on having any official visits to Los Angeles. As I said, I do have a reason to be on the East Coast. But as individual, I'll probably visit Los Angeles soon. But once we have an agenda, once we have a plan, and once it's time to visit Los Angeles, I'll visit Los Angeles. I also want to remind everyone that the results of the election, the June 20th election, will also determine as to what happens, with Armenia vis-a-vis government. Clearly, if we don't know what will happen, if the ruling coalition ends up being the ruling party again, the chances of, let's say, me being in this office are higher, but still not guaranteed, right? We don't know. So we're obviously planning on long-term strategies and our long-term plans, but elections are a bit of a wild card, and we'll see what happens.
Great, thank you for that, Mr. Sinanyan. And we have a question in Armenian. Ինչ կասեք Հայաստան հիմնադրամի մասին եւ կլինի հաշվետվությունը? And quick English translation, what information can you share about Armenia Fund and when will the report be released?
As far as I know, the report has been prepared and it's available. I may be mistaken, but it will be publicized in May, if I'm not wrong. But again, there's no big mystery about the Armenia Fund. There's really isn't. If the question is about why a transfer was made to the Armenian national budget, that issue has been addressed and readdressed and readdressed 100 times. So, their audit and their report is their report. They'll provide it. I no doubt there's no impropriety involved in any way, but again, that's Armenian Fund's responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And we have another question from one of our viewers regarding diaspora organizations. So the question is, do you think that diaspora organizations are doing enough to promote your actions, like the ECORS program? So do you think diaspora organizations are doing enough?
Honestly, I'm not aware of diaspora organizations promoting our programs or our actions. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. We really haven't sought their involvement in spreading our programs, although that would be nice. Perhaps we should do a better job of it. But we do have a lot of counterparts in the diaspora, many, hundreds of organizations with whom we work closely on various projects, be it educational, be it building of homes, be it economic promotion, be it healthcare. I mean, the number is immense. And we're very thankful for our colleagues, for our friends, for our supporters, because they're not our supporters, they're supporters of their homeland, Armenia. And of course, when I say Armenia, I mean myself as well. And that's that. I'm just very grateful. Can the diaspora do a better job? Of course, it can do a much better job at everything that it does. But a lot of the quality of the result that we've seen from the diaspora, I blame on Armenia. Historically, I think Armenia historically has failed to give direction to the diaspora, to kind of engage diaspora, to make it feel like an equal partner in this sort of business of state building. And as a result, we've had less than desirable effects, and that was demonstrated even during the war. But again, I don't blame the diaspora itself. Armenia should take responsibility for that. Historically, again, since independence, it's done a mediocre job of engaging the diaspora and giving it direction, sharing its vision, and getting diaspora's buy-in into the vision, or getting the diaspora also in shaping that vision, which is something that I would love to do very much. We were hoping to do in 2020 during our planned Armenia Diaspora Conference, during which we're going to discuss various issues, including the creation of a upper parliament, kind of the Senate structure consisting of diaspora representatives. And although these issues got delayed, I think they remain very important. They remain very actual, and they will be discussed in the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And another question regarding business in Armenia and diaspora investment in the country. So what types of business investments is Armenia in need of right now?
The short answer is that Armenia is in need of investments in every sphere of the economy. Obviously, Armenia's three strongest economic sort of locomotives are tourism, agriculture, and the IT sector. Of course, mining is also a very important part of the economy, but we as a people, we want to stay away from mining, because that mining is, first of all, is damaging to our environment. What's being produced is just ore. It's just the raw material. It is not being processed in Armenia. So Armenia is not benefiting from the much higher value of the processed end product. We are selling the cheapest form of the resource, which is, and again, the environmental impact on Armenia's nature is overwhelmingly bad. So mining has historically, in the last 25 years, gotten a lot of attention, and every corrupt former official has had major interests in mining and has sold off hundreds of mines throughout Armenia and has become billionaires in the process, and we don't want to perpetuate that process. So if you were to ask me now, I would still highly recommend investing in Armenia's high tech, in the IT sector, tourism, but also manufacturing. Manufacturing is something that's been picking up, with the exception of second half of 2020. It's been picking up speed. So there's a lot of, especially textile manufacturing, coming back to Armenia, and I think it's a very promising area that folks can invest in. In essence, if someone wants to invest in Armenia, they'll certainly find where to do so. But the specific areas that I talked about are ones that are growing faster.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And a question regarding what role the Office of the High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs plays in policymaking in the Republic of Armenia.
Obviously, depends on the specific issue at hand. The more relevant the issue is to Armenian diaspora relations, the more active we are in it. I'll tell you that in my mind, the way I see Armenian diaspora relations, any area of Armenia's policy making somehow is connected to the diaspora. Because I think Armenia's future, as I see it, depends on Armenia's ability to engage diaspora much more deeply, and much in a full way. And as a result, I can't see any issue being solved in Armenia without major diaspora. So therefore, if before the war I was kind of letting a lot of issues pass by us because I thought, okay, well, there's a ministry for that and they know what they're doing and take care of it. I've kind of changed my mind since the war because I believe that no, I'm not going to rely on some ministry knowing what they're doing. We need to be involved and make sure that people who actually know how to do this thing are engaged, brought in, co-opted, and made participants in the process. So increasingly, I intend to be much more aggressive in policy making. I don't know where that'll get me. Shorten my tenure in this position or not, but frankly, I don't care. I think the state and national interest come first, and I intend to push on these issues and push for diaspora engagement in every aspect of Armenian life as much as is humanly possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan. And here's a fun question. So, you talked about the AstraZeneca vaccine coming to Armenia, which is great news. And, keeping COVID-19 in mind, will diaspora Armenians be able to travel to Armenia this summer?
I tried to address this issue a little bit in my opening remarks. I certainly hope so. I think with increased vaccinations, both in diaspora and in Armenia, the threat of COVID is much smaller. Again, as I mentioned, Armenia is a country that has relatively light limitations on life, on normal life. For example, Armenian outdoor seating at restaurants has been open since September, late August, early September of last year. Restaurants are packed in Yerevan, and go anywhere you want. I'm not happy about sort of the culture of not wearing masks. That seems to be prevalent in Armenia, but I do have to say that a lot of people have gotten already and have come out of it. I'm not saying not making light of that situation. All I'm saying that there's some indication of herd immunity, although again, numbers of infected are back up to low thousands. So it's about 1,000 a day, which is very high, considering that just a month ago, numbers were in the hundreds, 100. But I guess these waves come and go. That hasn't really slowed down life in Armenia, fortunately, for the last few months. And with these lighter limitations and with more flights coming to Armenia, we certainly hope that diaspora will start coming back uh, and start visiting the homeland, because we miss you, and Armenia misses you, and we want you here very much. And hopefully we can have a summer filled, in Armenia, filled with diasporans.
Great, thank you. And another question from one of our viewers, are you planning any specific actions or programs directed towards the young, retired, highly qualified professionals of the diaspora, specifically people in their 60s and early 70s?
We're not currently working on any such program. It's an interesting idea. If the person who asked the question has something that they'd like to offer, more than happy to hear it and consider it and implement it. So nothing age related, but we're happy to consider any constructive idea that may be.
Thank you, Mr. Sinanyan, for this very informative discussion. This brings us to the end of our Q&A, and thank you to everyone, our compatriots in the diaspora, who tuned in and also asked some questions. I'll go ahead and return the floor back to Mr. Sinanyan for closing remarks and any last messages he has for our diaspora compatriots. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Asmik, and thank you to Navarta and Amalia also for setting up this update. I again want to thank all of our compatriots who tuned in. Hopefully, this was useful to you, as useful to you as it was to me, because I really enjoyed answering the questions as well. We are trying our best to make sure that Office of the High Commissioner on Diaspora Affairs is as reflective of the diaspora as possible, because only through such format do I believe we can be effective in what we do. So, for example, Asmik is a member of the Igor's program. She's a fellow. In our office, we have several employees that are from the diaspora. We have folks from Russia. We have folks from the United States. We have a person from China, from Israel, from Lebanon. So our office is truly reflective of the diaspora, and we intend to make it more so in the future. So if anyone wants to really get into it and work for the Armenian government, and they believe that they have the skills, they have the education, and they have the desire, and also the guts to be in Armenia, in their homeland, which is the best place to be anyway, and work and from the inside change things, make things better, to change the culture within the government. I encourage everyone to take a chance and apply. No guarantees that things will work out in terms of being hired, but again, we're always looking for talent. We're always looking for enthusiastic, effective, well-educated folks that can help us bridge the divide between Armenian diaspora. Having said that, I will hope that everyone keeps in good health. Miss you all a lot, and we hope to see you soon in Armenia. Thank you.